Hi folks, welcome to Sorting Myself Out. This will be part 3 of the origins of Dr. Roger Strachan's self-soul-spirit model. Dr. Strachan takes us through the beauty of the wilderness and the awakening of soul, and where his self-soul-spirit model really started to take form. I think you'll enjoy what's in store today, and we'll keep the content coming. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 with Dr. Strachan yet, hit the exclamation mark at the top of the screen. We've created a playlist for you with all of Dr. Strachan's material.
The actual origin is in Sedona, Arizona. My partner and I put together the Center for Creative Choice, and we started doing Gestalt groups, and the people mostly came out of Phoenix because we had a practice there and we had a practice in Sedona. And he also was working at the mental health center and behavioral health center in Flagstaff. So Sedona was a good place for us to live. And he went to work sometimes, a couple of days a week, and then he came down to Phoenix, where I had a practice, and then we had a practice in Sedona. And we noticed when we came up with the Gestalt groups that the first morning there, they're all looking out at the window. I mean, universal, the whole group, maybe except in one or two. We're not starting the Gestalt workshop because they're enamored with the beautiful red rocks and the creek and the gorgeous geographical surroundings of Sedona, which attracts millions of people to the year. Okay? And Larry had the first idea. He said, wow, when we run these groups, on the first morning, and maybe even the second morning, let's let them go out and be in the beautiful Sedona geography, the wilderness. And they'll bring in what they want to work on, because the wilderness will stir stuff. And sure enough, he was right and I was right, and we decided that would happen. And so many of the work began on what got triggered by being in the wilderness, juxtaposition to their life in the city. Okay? Like, you know, what I just realized this morning was out there, I need this peace in my life. I need to be able to hear the birds singing. I'm working too much, whatever. And we go to do the Gestalt work. And so their Center for Creative Choice got its first real thing with a Gestalt therapy, and it said to me, oh my gosh, I got to create a self-soul-spirit model. I got to create the self of the genetics, the life force of the soul, and the great unknown of the spirit. And it is the spirit of the wilderness that stirs the soul in this person to want to work on the parts of the self. And away it went. So I started to work on self-soul-spirit seriously in 1973. And then that summer, I put it in practice. And I dropped out. I gave up teaching, and I gave up my practice, and only took 2 more years to wind my practice down because I didn't want to leave anybody. So the origin of the self-soul-spirit is what my daughter says, Dad, you became your first client. And I did. The other origin of this was Gail Sheehy's book, Passages. And in there, almost all the men who made transformational midlife issues they're going through not a transformation, but a time of disruption. And so it was called a midlife crisis. And I said, I'm in midlife. I'm 40. I'm going to drop out. It's not going to be a crisis. It's going to be a choice. Which then, as my daughter said, wow, Dad. Because the choices before then, get a job, as I said, get the gold watch and die. That's the model in 1950. By 1973, that model's not holding. And it's certainly not holding for me. So I'm one of those people that says no. The second part of this origin is I had become so self-directed through my scientist, teacher, father, seeker, compulsive driver, manager, that my hermit, my wild man, my athlete, and my 10-year-old were pretty much left out.
Wow.
90-hour work week. I loved it. It wasn't that I didn't love it. It was I didn't have time for other things of life. My lover didn't have enough time with my children, which were precious to me. I'm turning over some of the day-to-day stuff, fighting for a weekend or time out. Well, if I drop out. So even before it started in 71, when I moved out of Phoenix, remember I said I started the transition at 68. In 71, I moved my children to Sedona. I got them out of the drug scene. I got them into the wilderness. Tremendous impact. Small schools, a group of friends. Okay? Here's the most amazing thing. I had, as the original chair of my doctorate, was the chairman of the department. But he asked me to find someone else. I did. And then that someone else moved to New Mexico. And then I got another chairman of my doctorate. The chairman of the department said, Roger, you can't move to Sedona. I said, why? He said, don't you realize the beauty, the wilderness of Sedona? You'll never finish your dissertation. This is 1971. I've already done my comps. I've already done 3 chapters of my dissertation. It means all the research was done. I had only 2 chapters to write. The 4th chapter on results, the 5th chapter on summary. He said, you won't finish. I said, why? He said, you realize what a punitive thing this is. You'll get healthy, and you're not allowed to get healthy until you get your Ph.D. done. You get your Ph.D. done, then you get healthy. He was almost right. I moved to Sedona in 71. I had to move back to Phoenix, get an apartment, sell my home in Sedona, which I did. I rented it.
To finish your PhD?
To go to Arizona State University, to lock myself in a little cubicle to finish my PhD. The beauty, magnificent of Sedona. I began to change. I began to realize that I'm not living a soul-directed life. I'd put my soul aside. I became so attached to the beauty of the wilderness that I said, I've got to drop out. I would have dropped out in the Chiricahua Mountains if in 1974 my daughter did not come to live with me. In 1974, my wife had another major relapse and went into St. Luke's for her alcoholism. Okay? And the doctors there said, you have to take your daughter. So instead of moving to the mountains, I moved to this quiet little town in Bisbee that was crazy as butter. But she could get on the bus and go to school or drive with her friends. Okay. So the father settled the father-daughter issue. The one who dropped out, the wild man, lived in this remote little town that had closed up from mining. Okay, now, it took from 68 to 75 to get to Bisbee. I finished with my 2 kids in Sedona, the older ones, because my youngest wasn't living with me. The 2 older, then I emancipated in Sedona. This is a great emancipation. Talk about choice. I sold the house. And I said to the kids in 1973, I'm moving out. I sold the house. You got to find a place to live. And they laughed and they said, and they were so strong and independent they did it anyway.
Right.
Okay. I go down to Phoenix. The reason I went to Phoenix is I had to lock myself in a cubicle because I was too healthy to finish my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
I was already past it.
Mm-hmm.
I was already into other aspects of what am I going to do with my life.
Mm.
Between September of 74 until December, I finished my dissertation. Then I began the process of wrapping up Phoenix and everything else. And of December of 74 to June of 75 is the time I got all the other details in order, like selling my beautiful Austin Ely. I couldn't afford it. And restoring an old 1950 truck.
Mm.
And I go to Bisbee, 1975. Now here's where parts work comes in and where the origins. I was my own first client. In the first couple of months, maybe even up to 3 months, in Bisbee, I would wake up in the middle of the night with the teacher minister, the philosopher scientist, and the father, and the compulsive driver, and the manager saying, "What did you just do? You left a career where you never had to do anything but just keep showing up. You were tenured. You'd have to throw babies off the balcony at the college to get fired. Your practice is self-perpetuating. You're working 90 hours a week. And guess what? Your debts are all paid. Your bookkeeper says, now I'm ready to make you into a millionaire. All the money you're making right now, we're going to convert." I said, "No, I'm dropping out." "Why?" "I got to go live by my soul." And there was the first thing. So I went to Southern Arizona, and this is all part of the origins, to work on the self-soul-spirit model, and then to work on wilderness encounter. If what happened in Sedona in a minor way, what would happen if I took people out going through major life transformations into the wilderness for those who's appropriate? So the origins are all the things that were happening in psychology and the shift into self-theory and the choice I made around Gestalt and then the studies I got. So my teachers were first generation, as I shared, great teachers. And I've asked you to read some of their books.
Mm-hmm.
The experience in Sedona in 73, the taking of my son in the summer of 73 to emancipate him and get in touch with how compulsive I was and how driving I was for work.
Wow.
And then that experience in Mexico of living in the moment to moment and throwing my watch away.
Wow.
So when I moved to Bisbee, I did not have a phone. I did not have a watch. As you could write me. People were really upset. I said, the post office still works. And I said, anyway, you can't reach me on the phone 90% of the time. Why? Because I'm out in the wilderness. I used Bisbee as a jump start to go into all of the mountains areas and desert areas of the Southwest, southern part of the state. And I traveled to Central and South America, lived 2 or 3 months at a time in Guatemala, and traveled to Panama. I was in Panama the day we gave up the canal when Carter signed it over. I was in Nicaragua the day the revolution broke out, and I had some wild experiences.
Wow. That's incredible.
It was incredible. Now, it changed my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not have a midlife crisis. I had a midlife transformation. And here's the phenomenon that stuck. I've not worked more than 2 days a week on an average. I might work 10 or 12 days, then be off a week or so. But when you look at the end of the year, it adds up to 16 hours a week. That's the average.
How do you define work?
What we're doing.
Okay, got it.
Training,
Clients.
psychotherapy, writing.
So the rest
Consulting.
of the time you were adventuring.
What?
You were adventuring and
Yes,
exploring.
yeah. And what did that look like? Being an obsessive compulsive, guess what? The athlete got to race bikes, got to climb mountains, along with the wild man,
Right.
and along with the hermit.
Yeah.
Got to spend weeks out in the wilderness all by myself.
Very cool.
Got to run marathons. I became a marathon runner at 40. I raced bikes until I was 49.
Wow.
Retired.
So you had a great.
Oh yeah, I traveled. I mean, the seeker. They all got a life. And here's the point: when we go to work on the podcast you and I just finished around your little boy, I re-raised my 10-year-old.
That's a perfect segue into that, isn't it?
Isn't that perfect?
Yeah.
I re-raised him. I spoiled him rotten. I gave him the childhood that he wanted. My mother was not there. Thank God, my mother, what she didn't do for the 10-year-old, she did for the adult parts. After my stepfather deserted, my mother made her amends. You couldn't have asked for a better mother, or a better grandmother, or a better great-grandmother. My mother died living out, caring as a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, literally. When I was right in the middle of graduate school, she moved in with my wife and children so that we could work a swing shift, and she'd come home for work and take care of the kids in the evening.
Wow.
She did all sorts of things. Amazing?
That is amazing.
Now, the origins then are in all of that living phenomena, academic phenomena, culture phenomena. And I believe that's what happens in life. We then recreate through epigenetics the phenomena and the genetic changes. Okay?
Yeah.
There's the origins of. Now, the next time we talk, I will tell you how Wilderness Encounter developed right out of my time in Bisbee. And it goes this simple. Here's the introduction. If this works for me, going in the wilderness, will it work for others? Ergo, I'm going to have therapists send me men to begin with that are going through major life transformations that are appropriate for the wilderness. Those that I don't think would do well in the wilderness, which is another genetic predisposition, I'll do other kinds of things. Maybe a little car camping, maybe just for a day. But these guys, or these ones I'm going to take out initially, at least a week, maybe 10 days. No distractions. The wilderness. And the wilderness will create the work. I didn't go into the wilderness other than the first time with any agenda. I went into the wilderness over here now. Now, I did choose different wilderness experiences with the client, okay? So one client and I chose the mountains in Flagstaff, and we were up in the inner basin, and it wasn't quite right. And I realized he needed rebirthing. He realized he needed rebirthing. We packed everything up. We went to the Grand Canyon. We went down to the bottom Grand Canyon, and he rebaptized himself into a new life.
Cool.
Literally, jumped right in the Colorado River and says, I'm coming out brand new baby.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So in the time now, in our other podcasts, I'm going to have many stories of mine, which some of them we already showed in the other podcast, Epiphanies, but we'll begin with these.
Fantastic.
Right.
Wow.
Let's stop
What
there.
an adventure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching Part 3 of the origins of Dr. Strachan's Self-Soul-Spirit model. Part 4 will be coming soon, and we're going to continue to go deeper and deeper, including you'll even get to see him doing some therapeutic facilitation work with me. Thank you so much for your support, Hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying this, as well as the notification bell so you don't miss anything going forward.